Really good presentation.
Thanks.
I enjoyed it. So we have some gymnastics to do. We're going to break into tracks for one session and then come back here. So if you want to stay in this track, we have a really great presentation on brand. We're going to talk about a risk-reward creative framework. However, if you're interested in modern marketing capabilities, there's a panel next door on marketing impact measurement. And if you're interested in AI and data, 2 rooms over, there's going to be a panel discussion on data-driven demand generation. So since I'm playing for the home team, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Mike Zussel, and he's from Stencil, and he's got a panel about balancing bold storytelling with compliance in financial marketing. So that's a trade-off. I'd like to see how you navigate this one with your little pet dog there. And your panelists are Angelica, is she here?
Angelica's there, yeah.
Angelica Montagano. Sorry.
We're almost there.
Montagno or Montagano?
Aren't you Italian?
I'm Italian.
Come on.
Head of brand at PW Capital. Rick Lake from Boston University. You're at the Digital Institute up there?
Yes.
Yeah. I know the dean up there. So, and then, Vital Parker, and you are from JP Morgan, where my son works,
Nice.
and you're a marketing strategy lead.
Yes, sir.
So I'm super excited about this one.
All right.
That's okay.
Thank you. Like we just mentioned, we're going to chat today about storytelling within a compliance framework. And we'll start off with some introductions. After the introductions, we'll get into the discussion. And then we'll wrap with 5 minutes or so of Q&A. And to start introductions, this is Speedy the Stencil Sloth. It's not a dog, but it does look like one when we walk around with it. And my name is Mike Zussel. I'm a director of workflow transformation. I worked in financial services for many years before Stencil at Bank of America, EY, doing large workflow transformation projects. And to give you a little bit of background on Stencil and also why Speedy, the Stencil Sloth, is because Speedy might look slow, but with Stencil, he creates emails and landing pages fast. And Stencil is a governed creation platform. And the reason we put governance in place is so that instead of marketers and designers needing to put together briefs or design mockups and request emails and landing pages to be created, we allow for that to happen without the bottlenecks and getting compliance approval really quickly. So when you have your story, you can get it to market really quickly. So with that said, we'll go down the line and do some intros.
Okay, I guess I'm next in line. This is actually my ex-compliance officer. Very easy to work with. So I'm Rick Lake. My academic background is in folklore and mythology. I'm a trained storyteller. And I spent decades in the asset management industry dealing with every regulatory rubric you could imagine. And through the luck of the draw, I actually spent a decade as a chief compliance officer working across investment advisor regulation, registered 40 Act fund regulation, futures regulation, insurance regulation, bank regulation. So I'm a storyteller who was pushed through the compliance sieve. I hope to share some of my pain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, hey everyone. I'm Vital Parker. I call myself a brand enthusiast. Like I just like everything that since I was a kid that was just looked cool to me, like whatever it was, whether it be my football cleats or the TV or PlayStation or whatever I had all the way down. And just always interested in why do I think this is dope? Why is it packaged this way? Why does it connect with me and my friends? And what did the brand go about to kind of make it that way? So I've always been interested in branding, and that's how I've stayed in marketing. Financial services fell in my lap. I didn't seek it out. And then obviously with it, compliance came on top. So that's kind of how I've gotten into this conversation with what is compliance and how do you manage it with branding. So excited to talk to you all today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Angelica Montagano, Head of Brand Experience for PWL Capital. We are an independent wealth management firm up in Canada. I want to say thank you to the guys for taking the stools, my short legs. Thank you. We are a brand-centric, content-first firm. So we actually produce a podcast that has almost 400 episodes, 9 million downloads total. Our largest YouTube channel is almost at 500,000 subscribers. And we have over 2,500 blogs and white papers on our website, so I know a thing or two about storytelling and dealing with compliance.
Thanks so much. And obviously, you could see we have some incredibly accomplished panelists. So we'll start with the first question, which is, can you talk a little bit about how at your firms or your previous firms you've managed storytelling along with a compliance framework? And we could start with you, Rick, and Angelica and Vital.
All right, so let's talk about some basics with storytelling. Humanity is actually a storytelling beast. I think we were misnamed as Homo sapiens. We should actually be called Homo narrans, because we're the one species that tells stories. And we do that to understand our past, understand the present, and move into the future. So storytelling is utterly integral to everything we do. It's very structural, and it drives emotion and action. The flip side of that is compliance. And compliance is about making sure that your story is on the up and up. The SEC doesn't hate stories, they hate fibs. And what compliance does is it governs the nature of the story, how we talk about the facts, and it also governs the language. And it's very specific about the language we use. If you look at the SEC marketing rule, it has to be fair and balanced. If you look at the FINRA mutual fund rules, it's about being non-promissory. And when you get to the performance level, there's very strict rules as to how you speak. So storytelling is about driving emotion and investor action, and compliance is making sure we keep that all on a level and honest playing field.
Thank you. Yeah, and Angelica?
I think no one studies marketing thinking, I'm going to go into finance marketing. It's so exciting, a regulated space. So when I work with other marketers, they tend to express their frustration. Like, oh God, compliance won't let me do this, won't let me do that. Anyone who studied marketing, they hear your best friend is your CFO. Okay, your second best friend in our industry is your CCO. You need to go to the table together and understand what each other need to do. We're the two sides of the same coin. I'm trying to promote the brand, they're trying to protect the firm, right? I've had compliance officers tell me, I don't get marketing, I don't get what you do, because they're so analytical, they're so black and white thinking sometimes, unfortunately, where you need to kind of go across the aisle, get that relationship with them so you could sit together and not say, you're not letting me do this, or I can't do that. It's more, I want to do this, how are we going to get there? And that's how we got around creating the podcast, having our communities online. And it's, I think, about that trust that you have with compliance internally before you even think about the storytelling externally.
Yeah, I mean, I'll echo just kind of what they both said, right? Like, it truly is a balancing act between bringing to the table exactly what your goal is and what you're trying to do with your story, right? And understanding this is our brand, this is how we're positioned, and this is how we exist, and then this is where we're trying to go with it by telling this story, and then bringing in compliance and everybody and say, okay, what are your concerns with this? Or like, what doesn't make sense to you? Or like, what are the guardrails that you would prefer we put in place as we're telling this story? And then from there, it's now a collaborative effort to, get to the same place as opposed to a fight, so.
Yeah, I think that's really the crux of it is building that relationship. And when we think about storytelling and compliance, I think that there's a big workflow that has to happen. It's usually not just, hey, can you approve this? But a lot of back and forth. And then after the story, there's also actually creating the marketing assets and bringing those assets to market. Vital, you're at JP Morgan, and I'm sure a lot of folks are wondering at a company like JP Morgan, what are some timelines, SLAs for concepting the story, getting approval on that story, and then building the assets to actually bring that story to the customer? Can you walk us through what those timelines look like, especially as it relates to digital assets?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that it obviously depends on the asset that we're talking about, right? But just to give you a couple examples, let's say we start with, I'll give you two examples. Like, let's say we're starting with, we want to build a new product page. We have a new product coming out, or we want to fix a product page, right? So, and then another example might be we want to create a video. So it starts with, all right, who are we using to create the actual assets, either internal partners or a vendor external, right? So take whatever timeline that is, we get the assets in hand. The first steps are taking it through brand review. So the brand has to look at it and say, okay, this is our correct color palette. These are our correct, this is the way we say things. We don't use these commas here. We can't put, faces that look like this, et cetera, right? So that takes about 2 to 3 weeks. And then from there, we go into actually getting all the approval from legal, risk, compliance, product, et cetera, authorized approver. That takes another probably 2 to 3-ish weeks. So all in all, when you're doing a landing page, it's probably around anywhere from 1 to 3 months, depending on how many rounds of feedback come in. And then something like a video from, conception to publication, we're looking probably more like 3 to 6 months. And so, I mean, you really are always looking for ways to bring people to the table earlier, so you can kind of cut those things down. So by doing that, what we try to do is say, hey, compliance, legal risk, brand, here's a meeting. We want to create a video. We want to create a landing page. This is what we wanted to say. This is kind of the goals of it. Before we get into getting this made, like, what do we need to make sure is checked off first? That way you try to cut down on some of the approval times and some of the feedback rounds. And even then, like, as you're getting iterations back, we're even sending them back like, hey, this is the first iteration. Do you see any red flags right now? So that way, when it's actually in your queue to approve, it's not something that they're seeing for the first time, and it's not something that we might have to, completely pivot, go back and redo. So.
Yeah, that's. I think most people are probably thinking that's on par, right? Like for a large bank to spend maybe 1 to many months to actually come up with a story, to get compliance to approve it, to create the assets, and to bring that to market. And Stencil works with over half of the top 10 banks in the country, and I think those timelines are usually on par from what we see. With a lot of optimization and putting in governance, we've seen those timelines sometimes come down to 1 to 2 weeks. And a lot of times, if you could actually reduce the production time, the compliance also can go faster, because like you said, I think they have to kind of approve at every step along the way. So the less steps there are, the faster the compliance could go, the faster the story can actually get to market. And Angelica, I'm curious to understand a little bit more about organizationally how you're set up at PWL to what team is actually coming up with the story, what team is bringing it to market, and how are those staffed, and how are you set up to handle the volume that you're at?
So any small teams out there, any leads of small teams, I am your champion to tell you, you have the competitive advantage. Listening to you broke my heart. I can put a landing page out if I need to within an hour with compliance approval. I can put a podcast out with production, everything from recording to everything within 24 hours with compliance approval. Because we're a small team, I could just call my compliance officer and say, hey, no. I have friends that work at a large bank. It took him 9 months to get a video approved, and a 12-minute video, PS. And every time he'd send the video, there was something else that the first compliance officer said, no, that's okay. And then the other compliance officer came back and said, no, that's not okay. And it was just mind-boggling. And I think it's really stunting growth. So just to talk about the production time, it's so quick. So if you have a small team and you're hearing like these big names and everything, ignore that. You're actually putting out more content and better content quicker. When I started to grow my team, I did it differently because we're so content focused. The first person I hired on my team was a multimedia specialist to edit our videos. We produce one video minimum a week. They're about an hour long. And the visual aspect of it I thought was super important just because people care visually what things look like. I have 2 graphic designers, again, a lot of visual, and someone who handles social media, another person handles our website. In terms of all the thought process around it, we have our CIO. He comes up with all of our research and really technical information. We take that, repackage that, and put that out with our content or even just newsletters, emails, and landing pages. But I completely empathize with all of you in larger organizations. I'm also Canadian. Our regulators are like a walk in the park compared to the SEC. My firm was recently acquired by an American firm, and I had quite the experience with their compliance team. They're like, sorry, you can't say trusted advisor. Excuse me, I'm selling trust. How can I not say trusted advisor? Or, ooh, you can't say your advisors are experts. You can't use the word expert. I'm sorry? Like in Canada, a financial planner, financial advisor, you have to go through a rigorous process to get those titles. I don't know how it is here. I would assume there's a CFP or something you need to do. No? Someone say no? Yeah, so that needs to be regulated first because I think it's crazy that here in the room we don't sell products, we're selling trust. We need to demonstrate that, right? And yes, okay, it's great, we're learning about content and all that jazz, but like if you come to a website and you're like, hey, are they legit or not? There's some language we should be able to use. That's my little rant about the compliance team in the US. But yeah, so that's pretty much it. Sorry, it took so much time.
No, that was great. I'm wondering, something that you just made me think of is obviously being small means agile, but also what happens when, if you only have like 1 or 2 folks there, what happens when they're out of the office? What happens when, I'm curious.
Yeah, great question. So we are a small but mighty team, and when I hired, I made sure that it was a lot of generalists and not just producers. So if someone's off, we always have a backup within the team, right? Someone will understand each other. If anyone's been to my workshop that was yesterday, I am a big marketing nerd, right? Unfortunately, I really love talking about this stuff and learning about this stuff, and I want my team to feel the same way. If you're just coming for a paycheck, unfortunately, I'm not the lead for you. I really want someone who wants to learn, develop, and get to know other aspects of marketing instead of just their role. So that's kind of how I've evolved my team in that way.
Awesome, yeah, and I think it's really important to think about how you're setting up teams, whether you're a smaller firm or a larger one, and we've done a lot of that work. We've actually coined the idea of this creation operating model, and everyone is set up in one of a few operating models, and it's really important to understand that when you're starting, and also when you're larger to see what you're doing today, how you're set up today, and find areas for improvement. So mapping all of that out is something we help a lot of our clients with to then bring them into a faster future state. And Rick, so you're the other side of the house, right? We've got the 2 marketers coming up with the stories, and we were talking about forming partnerships between folks like yourself that spent a long time in compliance, and then the marketing side. So from the compliance standpoint, do you have any kind of tips or ways that marketers can work and befriend compliance to ultimately get their story, what they want out there in the most efficient way possible? So I'd love to hear a bit more about that.
That's really interesting. Hey, I'd like to ask the audience a couple of questions first. How many of you create something that goes through compliance? That's why you're all here, because otherwise it's Friday afternoon. There's more fun things to do, right? How many of you are with large firms with long compliance lead times? How many of you are with smaller firms with short compliance lead times? Okay, so it's split 50-50. So a quick observation on both ends of that spectrum before we get to compliance. It's often frustrating at a larger firm to have a long compliance lead time because there's still pressure to produce. But you have to learn what compliance expectations are so you fulfill them. Is that fair for you people at large firms? And for small firms, there's a certain level of agility, but having advised a number of small firms, sometimes they are just compliance clueless. Have any of you stumbled on a small firm that is compliance clueless? Oh, you're all with the good small firms. And sometimes there's an educational process there. So you're asking me how to be friends with compliance?
Yes.
Compliance is not the content creator's friend. They are not designed to be the friend. They are designed to protect the firm and you from your worst instincts. And they are designed to protect you from regulators, because regulators don't really care about any of us. They care about enforcing their perception of regulation and law. So I don't think compliance is your friend. However, compliance can be a work partner and a collaborator. And as everyone in this room has discovered, if you find a way to be collaborative with compliance, both of you can anticipate what you need and help guide the process to a more effective result. Would any of you raise your hands if you said, wow, this is great. I actually have a really good collaborative compliance department. We work together to make great content happen that's also within the letter of the law. Can anyone raise their hand for that? How many want to say compliance has no understanding of what I do? They are nothing but an obstruction, and I tear my hair out nightly. Okay, only one or two, and the person with the longest hair in the room is tearing their hair out nightly. So it seems like for the majority, though, most of you have found how to collaborate with compliance and make them your friend. That's really nice. They should all get one of those little furry beasts.
These could be actually emotional support animals when people are working with compliance.
So here, let me have that for a second. See, so imagine if this is your compliance officer. Look at the depth of collaboration and friendship.
So
Right?
can I
Yeah.
hop in there?
A peace offering.
You're in Canada. You have it easy.
I'm still going to hop in, and I apologize for hopping in, so
No,
you got to let
please.
me in. So I think compliance can be your friend, not just a work collaborator. If I'm about to cut my bangs after a manic episode, right, and get micro bangs, I need my friend to come tell me, no, that's a bad idea, right? And compliance is that friend that's going to tell you, do not get micro bangs after a breakup, okay? That's the way to see it. On the flip side, though, compliance needs to want to be your friend. I think that's where it is. I think the firms here that have that relationship with compliance is because we have great compliance officers that know how to work in the gray zone, right? And to your point, Rick, there are compliance officers that are black and white, and it's a yes or a no situation, but the relationship should be you and your compliance officer against the regulators. Your compliance officer is just guiding you on how to get there. That's how I think we should frame it, because I think there's a lot of tension sometimes between the marketing department and compliance, and maybe, you know, it's the Canadian mean, we're all friendly and everything, but I think there's a way for us to get there together.
You know, the other thing, particularly in the U.S., since you're in folksy, easy, friendly Canada, oftentimes there's multiple external compliance forces. Anyone here in the ETF or mutual fund business? And, I mean, you all have to deal not just with your internal compliance people, but also your distributor's compliance person, and then FINRA reviews. And the farther you move out that cycle or curve, the more challenging it gets, because the external compliance people are working on their external agenda. They're not there necessarily to help facilitate your business goals and revenue targets. Just an extra layer of compliance complexity for some of the people in the room.
Yeah. And Vital, I'd love to hear from you on, at a large company like JP Morgan, there's obviously so many regulators. Are you working with the same people over and over where you could build that relationship, or is everything just like, you know, this is the way it is? Yeah, how does that look?
Yeah, fortunately, the way our org is set up, we're siloed, so sometimes there's a pro, sometimes there's cons to that, right? Like, we're super siloed by product, line of business, brand, et cetera. So generally, we work with the same, you know, compliance, legal, risk reviewers over and over, which definitely helps us build that rapport. And then also, something I've found is bringing them into the table much earlier, right? And also understanding in a big organization where there are so many people, who is the person I need buy-in from? Because I've run into situations where I brought people to the table, got approval for a project, get halfway through the project, and then all of a sudden somebody's knocking on my door like, hey, what are we doing with this? Like, who approved this? Why are we doing this? I want to review it again. And I'm like, so-and-so approved it 3 months ago. And they're like, well, I didn't see it. So then you learn from that, like, okay, I need buy-in from this person and this person, early on, and not just, the first person, right? Because if turnover happens or people change or things like that occur, then you don't want to have a, stop sign put onto your project, so.
Can I ask you a question? So how many compliance people do you interface with?
So when you say compliance, are you talking about like just the compliance? Because we have someone that's product compliance, risk compliance, legal, et cetera.
So how many people do you interact with in your approval cycle?
Typically about 5.
And I just, a quick time check. I know it's late on a Friday, and thank you all for sticking with us. We really appreciate it. But I believe this is probably off, right?
They keep giving us more time
Yeah, it keeps going up.
because it keeps going up.
Okay.
Okay.
Does anyone have any
We-
questions?
Yeah, please.
Thank you. So I am the VP of Marketing for a FinTech, and we have a sponsor bank. We're a payments app. We just launched the payments app about 3 months ago. My question is, how can I help to facilitate our external compliance group allowing us to be in social media? We're targeting Gen Z. Social media is a big channel for us. We need to be in the conversation. We don't have time to get a 2-week approval on if we can comment on a social post or not. What's the best way that you can suggest that I can maybe help educate them, guide them? I've given them like a whole big range of posts and say, okay, approve the whole thing. We'll pick out which one we want. I've educated them on how we're using influencers and how it's important for us to be in that flow of conversation. And yet I'm still stuck with this 2-week approval. And some things are happening in social media that we need to be in there at that time and don't have time to wait for a 2-week approval. Any ideas or suggestions about that?
Yeah, I can jump in on that a little bit. I mean, so what we've done, it depends on which social media app, right? Like LinkedIn, I think was the easiest barrier of entry for us, where we kind of set up controls and we had an external vendor that is 24/7 monitoring of the posts and the comments, because what we found a main concern of our compliance people was like, they didn't want somebody responding with, hey, I had a terrible experience, and then they're cussing, and then they're saying, I'm John from Atlanta. And there's like, that's an issue because now there's personal information in the post. So when we were able to kind of get a vendor that could jump in, clear those type of things out instantly, then they were much more comfortable. And then also going to the table with them around what are the use cases that truly make you the most uncomfortable? Because we found it really wasn't the content itself, right? Because the content, we could get a nice library of approved things, but they were, again, like the comments, things of that nature. So on top of getting comments removed and et cetera, we also were able to have things like a one-click to a disclosure. So if we're talking about a product, and they were like, well, hey, if you're talking about this product, technically that triggers this disclosure, this disclaimer. If you're doing a tweet or a LinkedIn post, I can't have a 1,000-word disclaimer at the bottom of it, right? Like nobody's going to click on that. So what they were comfortable with now is, hey, if you put a link in there to a product page that's already approved, already has the right disclosures, disclaimers, now they're comfortable with it. So those type of things.
We've had that, and I really appreciate that because we've had that also because we have, I've got a disclosures document that has like 5 to 8 different variations of disclosures with instructions on use this when we say this, use this when we say this.
Yep.
And then I've also tried to say, okay, let's just put the minimum disclosure that we're a fintech, we're not a bank, we're backed by the bank that's FDIC insured. Click here for more information. And in a lot of cases, they want us to post that entire disclosure in the captions. I said, I can't post that in the caption.
Right.
No one's going to read that. I mean, come on. So, but I like your idea about asking them, what did you say? What is it about this that makes you uncomfortable?
Yeah. So asking like, what scenarios are you uncomfortable with, or what is it, like, what do you think could happen that would bring us into a place of risk, as opposed to it being the content itself? Like, 'cause that's typically not what it is.
okay, what do you think could happen that could bring us into a place of risk? I like that. I also did some chat GPT stuff, and I uploaded a bunch of UDAP and regulatory stuff, and I put everything through there and say, hey, what are the red flags? And all right, I'm gonna stop pulling my hair out. I'll try something else.
Have you had a chance to sit down with these compliance people and say, we produce a lot of time-sensitive content. Why don't we talk about what it takes to respect the time sensitivity of this content, while at the same time being compliance sensitive, and get some of their ideas?
I have, but I have to admit, like lately, I'm just frustrated. So like
Yeah.
we had a UGC, we did a video that we paid someone to do. They want to see the script of the video, and then they want to see the final video.
Yeah.
And then because it was actually quite funny, and it was like this guy and this girl had a bad dinner date, and then she called him a loser. And because we didn't have the word loser in the initial script, they tried to say that the video was non-compliant. And I said, listen, this is what happens when you're kind of organically speaking, and it goes, some things may go off script, but so I'm really trying to narrow them down into what's good, what's not, and why. And I like your suggestion about asking them what makes them think that we're going to present a risk here.
Yeah.
Another thing to consider is offering them the opportunity to be there during filming.
I was going to say that,
Yeah,
Yeah.
because if they can say, oh, well, that word's a tough one, you can say to them, what word's better? Then you can turn to the talent and say, let's reshoot this, use the language that they need.
Okay, we're not there yet. We're getting people off Fiverr that, like in Hong Kong, that did it, and
yeah.
so we're not on set. So
Yeah, all right.
Can I give you
Thank you.
another angle to look at too?
yes, please.
Which is like an unethical life hack, maybe. But compliance comes in obviously to protect the firm and everything. Sometimes what I've done to get around is to build a business case on how this is going to increase our growth, right? And put some metrics around that. And then I swipe compliance and I go to leadership to say, hey, if we engage more people on social media, we can have a return of X. Because really, compliance decisions, yes, there's regulators and everything, but it's a business risk that they're taking. And when that risk is overtaking the growth, sometimes leadership will put more pressure on them to say, okay, how can we make this work? Because us as marketers, we're just creatives. We just put colors together, right? And their compliance is the law, right? They're lawyers, ex-lawyers, and everything. So I think sometimes we need to just have other allies, right, in the firm that can put that pressure. So just throwing it out there. Think about it, but
That's
you didn't hear this
actually-
from me.
That's a good idea. We actually did that because in one of the cases, not to take up too much time, I'm sorry, but one of the cases, I had the script approved by the influencer, and then they were taking too long to approve the actual video, so I posted it anyway. Got in a little trouble, but that's okay.
That's a big no-no.
But what happened was our downloads, we got the hockey stick, right? It was up and to the right after we posted that video. So I go back to that and say, hey, if I had to wait for you, I would have lost out on the back-to-school shopping season. I would have lost out on the Labor Day holiday weekend. And look at the hockey stick that we got in terms of our the resulting impact. So I'm pushing the envelope a little bit, but I'm trying not to do it so blatantly, and I'm trying to like pick my battles. But any way that I can help kind of soothe this, I'm going to try to continue to do that. So thank you.
Yeah. And I should have mentioned, would you like a sloth for asking a question?
You'll feel better.
Yeah, and you could offer this to your compliance person, as a peace offering. You could, maybe if you, or they get offended. I don't know. And if anybody else asks a question, we will give you a sloth, or if you want one, come by our booth. We have a bunch. So are there any other questions?
Hi, I don't have a question, and I'm sorry about that. This is a great panel. This was more of a point to the last commenter. Something that worked for us is we started doing live working meetings with compliance. So we ended up lessening the review timeline and the approval timeline from 2 weeks to 2 days, because we'll just we block a time off a week every week at 3:00. We meet, the marketing team meets with compliance, and then we walk through each step by step, and being able to actually talk through your reasoning instead of just doing it via email really helps with the process, because then when they push back on you, you can say, hey, what's your thought process around that? Like you said before, what are the risks that you see here? And then you have that conversation, and then you end up like assuaging their concerns, and then you end up pushing things through that otherwise in an email they would have just said no, 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 no. So yeah, that's just my point. I don't have a question.
Any other questions? No? Awesome. Anything else on the panel? No? Or Vital?
I thought we'd have Vital read out loud the JP Morgan compliance manual.
Yeah, we even just the footer of an email. I think that would take about 7 minutes.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I
have a
mean,
question?
Yeah.
So not really a question, more, Vital, you mentioned this earlier, but when I met with compliance to get, my first submission to compliance, I got my hand slapped, a bunch of bad feedback, and essentially they got me on a call, and how they explained it, and this is for paid search and paid social, like ad creative getting approved. They said that the landing page is approved, so you can pull messaging from that landing page because that's all that messaging is approved. It's got disclaimers at the bottom, so that's kind of like a menu you can use easily in your ad copy. Where you get in trouble is when your agency proposes a bunch of ad copy they wrote themselves that didn't come verbatim or at least highly inspired by the landing page content that they've never seen before, and now it's the Wild West. So if you kind of use the landing page as the menu for your messaging, that's already pre-approved. It makes their job a lot easier. So that's a little hack they gave me.
It's interesting. That also relates to AI. Because if you don't tell your AI or AI model that you want it to be compliant, it may default to marketing hyperbole, which is a disaster. So you need to tell your AI to be compliant. There are some systems which include a much more intensive AI overlay. So if you're in ChatGPT and you ask 5 thinking to produce content, it actually crushes it with overly compliant language. And there's actually some off-the-shelf AI content generation systems which start compliance first. And they achieve eyelids before eyeballs because it tends to flatten out the copy. So if you're using AI to generate content, you need to turn the dial right to find the balance between sufficient energy to get an audience response, but sufficient sobriety that you don't step on a compliance landmine.
Yeah. I think you brought up a great point, right, about, like you mentioned paid search and paid ads, is collaborating across your different verticals. Like you look at SEO, paid search, paid media, et cetera, social. And what we've done on the SEO side is starting to pull the language from like our paid search landing pages or the different disclaimers and using them in SEO because they got approved over there. And now we're like, hey, compliance, like they said X, Y, and Z. Can we start saying that on SEO content? And, it still had to go through approvals, but it was much easier than saying, my agency over here wrote this, and they're like, I don't trust them. So, great point.
Yeah, I think the world of AI is obviously changing. It's funny you say that you want to use AI to generate content and put and tune the dial right, but then there's also the compliance software that's checking the AI generated content, and so it's almost like AI checking each other. Right?
It's interesting. Even in ChatGPT, you can say, please examine this piece of copy, identify every compliance risk in every line, and how we should deal with it. And it actually generates a very practical compliance memo. So it can be your friendly, collaborative, proactive compliance partner.
Yeah, speaking of AI, I'm curious, Angelica, do you use AI in like your content process? Like I know we're not really able to use it, like because it just is a whole nother red flag, but like are you?
Yeah, so we use AI to remix some of our content.
Okay.
So if we have a webinar that's already been approved and everything, I'll take that and I'll make it into a guide or a blog or something and send it over to compliance. Obviously, we tweak some of the language or anything, but overall, I think AI, through my experience, has been pretty compliant when it's created content. The only thing I kind of foresee as an issue is I think some like paid search or paid ads, you can have AI remix it to like be the most efficient. And that's where you can kind of get in trouble because, it creates an ad that compliance never saw. And I think that's going to be an issue. But I think speaking to the compliance team of the American firm that acquired us, they're trying to create a tool to better check content because they're getting flooded with requests. Like people want to do finance content. It's just it's a new world for them too, right? So I think AI is going to definitely be a tool that's going to help us in the future.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're as a platform, we're realizing that more content is being generated now, right? It's not just that it's AI content, but you could do so much more content than you ever could before, and so kind of where Stencil is in this production of HTML, of emails, of landing pages that take sometimes days, weeks, or up to months to build. You could create so much more AI-generated content, but if you're still stuck in a 1 month or 2 month, very long production cycle, then that AI generative content has limits to how much you could create and how much you could actually get to market. So we're working to not only reduce the production time, but also ingest AI content directly so that you can get a finished, ready-to-approve asset with the AI content actually coded and produced within a very short time frame, and skip a lot of the checkpoints of regulatory because you've got that one asset ready to get approved. And I think between the AI piece pushing more content and production being slow, there lots coming together, and it's a lot shifting, I think, to the role of the marketer too, and away from all of this back and forth production. It has to support this new AI world.
Yeah, I have a question for the audience about that. Like, how many of y'all use AI in your creative processes? All right, and then how many of y'all amongst y'all disclose that it's AI is part of the process, like in the content itself? Yeah, I'm just curious for myself because it's like a battle amongst SEO or just in general about like, is it harmful to disclose that it's AI generated when it comes to like AI ranking it or using it versus if it's not?
I think it's harmful to people consuming it because that's your reputation.
Yeah.
Now they're gonna be like, well, you don't know anything, you use AI.
Yeah.
Not taken away from this conversation, but it's a whole other thing, right? Like, if I clock an AI video or something AI, I'm like, ew, gross.
Yeah.
Yet at work, I'm like, oh my God, this is amazing.
Right,
Like, it just saved me 20 minutes,
Yeah.
Yeah. We could probably all talk about AI for a very long time.
I think there's one more question.
Oh yes, sorry, me in the back here. So I'm new to marketing, and I was wondering, the process. Can you technically upload all the feedback from compliance into like an agent and run your script or your content through it before you even show it, so that like reduces the back and forth in a way? Is that something that's possible?
It's possible. Is your compliance team gonna like that?
Yeah.
That's the question, right? Like, compliance generally is traditional, even more traditional than whatever we deal with, right, in finance. So my opinion is you can make that bot to help you, sure, but you might still have to go through your layers of compliance.
Yeah,
Got it, thank
there
you.
are some firms that are trying to automate their compliance, and if the agent or the bot is owned by compliance, they're much happier with it than if it's owned
Yeah.
by marketing trying to pretend to be compliance.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Thank you so much to our amazing panelists. Really enjoyed the conversation, and we'd all love to chat more after this. So thank you, everyone, for your time on a Friday afternoon.